welcome to yet another exciting edition of Global Franchise Forum. My guest this afternoon is Mr. Matt O'Neill. Matt is a senior professional from Britain, and he brings 20 plus years of experience of global franchising. Along with him, I'll be joined by Gaurav Marya, our chairman and founder. Just a bit about Neil. Neil started, with his 20 best faces or 20 most powerful faces in franchising by the What Franchise magazine. About 14 years in plastic industry when he ventured into snack in the box, a small box franchise opportunity, which he grew to 125 stores before it was acquired. And some great association with Cadbury's and Mars, which brings, brings quite a bit of credibility to the association that he was having. He was instrumental with expense reduction analysts, which is a very renowned franchise group, and he played a significant role for many years before he ventured into helping other franchise industry leaders and franchise brands. It's a great pleasure to have you, Matt, with us, and look forward to this 1 hour session. Before we start, a quick word from Gaurav before we would like to have a presentation from you.
Welcome, Matt. I think welcome to our series. This series is special because we bring in people who have experienced many challenges in franchising, seen some opportunities, seen some different cycles of growth. You certainly have done that. You have built your own business, sold that business, worked with some successful enterprises. Now you're actively advising a lot of companies. It's our pleasure to have you on this panel, and we'll all look forward for hearing from you what is happening in the post-COVID. I mean, we're still not out of it, but what is happening in the world and where do you see franchising going? I know we are all very optimistic about franchising. We are very strong believers of franchising always comes from best out of adversities. So over to you. We're all happy to listen to your views.
Okay, so would you like me to just go through the presentation for you first of all?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'll just share my screen with you. So what I was going to do is just share with you, gentlemen, and the audience, really a little bit about franchising and my experience with franchisors and franchisees, and just a little tiny bit about me. I think Sach has already done the introductions, but I had a snack delivery business, 125 franchisees. It was a vending business as well, and then we went to work with expense reduction analysts, and also did franchise seminars with NatWest and Lloyds Bank. And I've helped over 500 people come into business over the years. And one thing that I've really learned is that franchising is all about relationships and partnerships. And if you relate that back to the most basic relationship of love between two individuals, then first of all, you meet somebody, you like the look of them, you like, and so on. You start to engage with that person, you court them, you get engaged, you go on to get married. And then you have this wonderful period after you've been married, a honeymoon period. Then the reality of life sets in, doesn't it? You know, that's very true. And sometimes there's problems, and sometimes there is a divorce as well. And in fact, marriage is one of the most successful partnerships, and yet 50% of them fail. And franchising is no different. So it's important to be able to manage that relationship between the franchisor and the franchisee. So if you go back to my very first slide with the two meeting with the flowers in their hand, when a franchisee is looking to go into franchising, or a franchisor is looking for franchisees, what they're really looking for is mutual passion and commitment to ethical franchising. So a person may start doing this online, and if you're a franchisor, you need to think about what does your online presence say about you. They'll want to know you've got a proper system, the proper training, you've got proper support in place, and you want to know as a franchisee, prospectively, can you actually follow a system And the franchisor is very keen to do that too. And so they will have a number of meetings, whether it's a discovery session via Zoom or an actual session you go to. And it's really, really important for ethical franchising that franchisors select the best franchisees. They're not just selling an opportunity to anybody. They turn away people that don't meet the standard. And as a franchisee, you want to know, well, can I speak to other people that are making the success of this brand? How does the franchisor measure the success of a franchisee? And they're not trying to just sell me something, not overselling the opportunity. As this relationship develops over time, you start to get to know each other. It's like a courtship, really. Confidence grows as you get to know each other. So preparing due diligence well is important for the potential franchisee. And having a process is really important for the franchisor, because it's all about understanding the model, having a business plan in place, getting good legal advice. And can the franchisee see themselves doing it? And as a franchisor, can you see them doing it too? And when you meet with the franchisor, it's very important to ask good, clear questions. And if you have some concerns, discuss them together. Can the franchisor validate the claims of earning potentials that they make? And again, support and training, what happens there initially and after the business too, if you want to grow your business. I think this is the most important thing that you try and build between the two parties is trust. During that engagement period, you're starting to build trust. And I like this slide because it tells you what trust is. Transparency is really important. As a franchisor, you are transparent, and people can see you have a responsibility because you're bringing people into business. You want to make sure that the people you're looking at are focused on the business, and also, is the business sustainable? And these days, technology really helps too. So again, it goes back to this relationship. Relationships are built on trust. So it's really important that both parties don't tell lies at this stage. Franchisors, you need to make sure that what you say in your prospectus, in your discovery days, in your meetings, through on to training and launch of the business, you need to make sure that it is consistent and truthful. And franchisees, you need to make sure that you fully understand the business model and what will be required of you. And again, not to tell lies about your circumstances, funding, or ability, because it's the trust that starts to grow at that start. Trust takes a long time to build and seconds to destroy. Now, once that due diligence is over, the business plan is prepared, the funds are in place, you've validated the franchise, you've spoken to franchisees, you've had some good legal advice from a franchise lawyer, then you and the franchisor are ready to sign a franchise agreement. One of the questions you asked me, Gaurav, about post-COVID-19 or during COVID-19 is the differences. Well, obviously, pre-COVID-19, most training was done on site or out with the franchisee or with the franchisor at their premises. During COVID-19 and post-COVID-19, I think this is the new normal, as we call it now. So we can see Zoom or home-based learning will take a bigger part of that, Zoom meetings and so on, or whatever other video conferencing techniques that you use. Now, it's really important that franchisees feel part of the family of the franchisor. You do hear some horror stories sometimes of franchisors where they bring the people into business. Once they've signed the agreement and taken the money, they can treat their franchisees with contempt, and that's just not professional. But it does happen from time to time. But good franchisors really make their franchisees feel part of the family. They really feel engaged, and at the end of the day, for a franchisor, this is an extension of your brand. So you really want those people to be part of your business. Once you've signed a franchise agreement, you've had training, you hit this honeymoon period, a wonderful time of life, first 12 months. I'm sorry this curve may be a little bit blurred, but I thought it was really interesting. If you look at the straight line talks about the well-being of the individual. And when they've signed the business and they start the business and they've been trained, they go into this honeymoon period and their spirits are really high. They're feeling really happy. And then it can quite easily, in the first 3 to 6 months, plummet a little bit. And they have this initial culture shock of, oh my goodness, I've spent my life savings. I'm doing a business. I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. And I start to panic. Well, it's really important that the lines of communication are kept open between the franchisor and the franchisee. And over time, you will start to adapt and you hit this, what I call superficial adaptation. And then the true reality sets in, like in a marriage, the true reality of kids, financial issues, home, whatever it happens to be, you hit this true culture shock. But good franchisors know this is going to happen, and so they help their franchisees to adapt, and eventually they can get back into that good feeling of adapting to running the business. You're learning to live with each other, so it's so important that you keep talking. Keep talking as the reality sets in. I like this phrase, the family that eats together speaks together. And that's the same in franchising. It's so important that franchisors don't just focus on the money. And it's so important that franchisees don't just focus on the money, but meet together regularly and speak and discuss your concerns and so on. And one of the things, I mean, conferences are really good eventually when we can get back to them, but video conferencing, Zoom meetings, or however you choose to do it, is so important. It's much better than a telephone call, because you can see the body language of the individual and you can see how they're really feeling as opposed to what they're just saying to you. And it's all about helping each other. So discuss your problems openly. The franchisor should have some good business administration and network support, regular business reviews, accountability calls, and provide perhaps a CRM system, good business tools. But just like in a marriage, it's important that the franchisee-franchisor relationship, that throughout times when there are issues, that you speak to each other respectfully. The minute the relationship starts to break down, the business can start to break down. So you might want to grow your business. You might want some help with strategic planning. You might have some challenges. I mean, lots of franchisors have got challenges at the moment. Perhaps, and you can, but if you speak with each other regularly and respectfully, you can overcome these issues. Now, just like any situation, the good relationships don't just happen. They need to be nurtured. So I call this period of time the franchising blues, when somebody's just started a business, because again, it's that adaptation of, oh no, you know, what am I doing? I'm not sure. I'm really nervous. Or what am I going to do? But a franchisor can give good tactical business advice and resolve these things. And if issues and disputes arise, it's important that you resolve them quickly. One of the things that we were always keen on in ERA and in my own business was stimulating a culture of enjoying the journey. It's not just about the destination. It's about enjoying what you're doing. You set up your new business. You know, families that play together, stay together. So it's good to have a culture of fun and things to do perhaps outside the business. And that will set you apart from the competition as well, because people will see not only is this a great business, but they enjoy what they're doing as well. That gives you a happy network and happy customers. If you have happy customers, they'll love you. If you treat your franchises as your customers, then they will love you too. And that's very important. Finally, you know, not everyone who starts a business is going to run that business forever. So is there an exit strategy? Everybody plans for their wedding. Why not plan for the divorce? And I mean that from a business point of view, because a divorce in franchising can be amicable. People can grow their business to a point where they actually can build it up and sell the business. And perhaps they're either going to sell it to not so much back to the franchisor, but other people can come in and buy a successfully established business. And something else that we're seeing a lot in franchising now is succession planning as well. So that either you have a succession plan with somebody within the business or perhaps a family member of passing that business on. So that's me. I'll just stop sharing that for a second. Hopefully you found that useful.
Very useful, very, very interesting. And I like the correlation between the marriage and the franchise. And I think in the way you simplified and told the emotion, how it passes through, it was very, very interesting.
Thank you. Thank you. So any questions, gentlemen? You know, is there anything you'd like to ask me that I can help with?
Sure. So I'll start with Matt, if you could give us a sense what's happening, more about British franchising and what's happening. What are you experiencing during these COVID times?
Well, interestingly, if you just take franchise recruitment for a second, finding new franchisees, the last 2 years have been very interesting in the UK, because whenever there is unrest in the government, or any kind of political unrest, it does seem to affect the franchise industry too, because people lose confidence until they know what's happening. Not for every franchisor, but white collar franchises, for example, when Brexit was the big issue over here, we saw franchise recruitment really sort of start to dip, and people not necessarily going on and to buy franchises. But that very quickly, with the Brexit deal almost being signed in January, I went to a franchise exhibition in January in London just before shutdown, because we didn't know about COVID at that point. And everyone was on a high. It was very well attended, and everybody was thinking this is going to be a great year. And then, of course, we all went into lockdown in March. And so 3 or 4 months of just no activity has affected, like I say, some businesses have boomed in that time, but a lot of businesses haven't. And so we're just starting to move. Businesses are starting to open again. It's only really been 2 weeks here in the UK, so very early stages. It seems to be changing on a daily basis. I think what people are most concerned about here in the UK is a second wave of COVID-19. So we had a big peak in April, but people are concerned about a second wave. But also as well, there's a lot of are you familiar with the furlough scheme in the UK?
Yes.
So a lot of people were furloughed where the government have paid 80% of the salaries, but that scheme ends in October. And what people are worried about is unemployment, because unemployment could get, predictions are perhaps even as high as 6 million people unemployed in the UK, which is an awful lot of people. But of course, unemployment is a good time for franchising in some ways, because people are maybe looking at controlling their own future and perhaps investing in a franchise. So I think franchising as a business, it went through a bit of a dip in the last sort of 2 years. But once we start to get out of this crisis, I think it will really take off, because there'll be lots of people looking to buy into businesses, and lots of people looking to work in a different way.
Gaurav, you've done a lot of business in London. So your thoughts on how the market is working? You also represent massage company and a couple of other brands.
So I think UK is a very strong franchise market. It's a very similar to India. We've rather inherited a lot of things from UK. It's a very shopkeeper nation, so people run their own small businesses, and where you put it, it would depend on how I think the governments would react in terms of opening up, because a lot of migrants actually start taking a lot of franchise. So, and that has been a problem in last a few years, and I think UK has been always forefront to open up to help a lot of people move there, because it's always going to be a preferred destination for people to live and work and so on and so forth. So that would come in, and I think UK government should also be and much more developed countries are always very mature in terms of quickly reacting to creating a lot of stimulation by business loans and cheaper loans and so on. So, which is a problem in India, because India, cost of capital is very high. And versus if you are in, say, UK and you want to take business loans, it's much easier to do that. And a lot of companies also encourage a good mortgage and so on and so forth. So there's a lot would happen. And I think there has to be a balance of some liquidity to be brought in. So liquidity would need an important aspect. And if you push a little bit liquidity towards a small business side, then I think there would be absolutely stimulation coming in.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally banks in the UK here have been very supportive of franchising. And I mean, particularly Lloyds, HSBC and NatWest, the three major banks here, and they would lend typically up to 70% of your franchise. Some is the franchise fee, some of it's up to 70% of the total amount of money to actually buy the franchise, working capital, and to run it for a period of time till it's profitable. A lot of that has changed during the COVID period, but I think banks will definitely get back to something respectable in terms of supporting franchisors and franchisees.
You also did a lot of work for banks, Matt. You were doing some seminars for NetWest.
Yes. So for about 7 or 8 years, I ran the franchise seminars, first of all in association with Lloyds Bank, and then in association with NatWest Bank. So what we used to do is we would put on a free seminar in one of the major cities in the UK, so London, Birmingham, Manchester, Newcastle, Edinburgh, and for people to come along and attend. So typically on a Tuesday evening, and we would run sort of between 12 and 20 of these events every year. And they were designed for people that didn't know anything about franchising. So if you were interested in franchising, but you just didn't know what to do, didn't know anything about due diligence, didn't know how it worked, you could come along to one of these franchise seminars, and you could find out over a 2-hour period. We'd have franchisors there as well. You could typically talk to some of the franchisors available. They would pay to go there, so that's what paid for the hotels and things like that. Since last year, where I set up franchise advisory services, I've now put these seminars online. So if people want to go online and watch them, it's franchise-seminars.info, franchise-seminars.info, and you can go on and download these seminars. There's like 14 coaching videos, just for a nominal fee. It was cheaper than actually getting a train into London or something like that. So, and people can, it's a one-off fee. They download it and they can watch it at their leisure in their home, and in a COVID-19 friendly environment these days. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed helping people who are in the early stages of finding out about franchising, because it is a great business model.
The legal front, there's somebody who's asking, what are the legal conditions there in terms of if somebody wants to start a franchise or export a franchise from here?
In terms of coming into the UK. So there are some specialist lawyers that will help you with, either if taking a franchise from the UK to India, or an Indian franchise into the UK. So yeah, there are a number of different organisations that specialise in that, and franchise lawyers particularly. Richard Davis of Global Franchising will probably help you identify some of those. But one of the things when you're bringing a franchise from another country into, say, the UK, or vice versa, is will that business work in the same way in a different country? Because there are a lot of cultural differences, commercial differences, and something that might work really well here might not work so well somewhere else, and something that might work really well in America might not work so well in the UK.
Sure. And Gaurav, you've imported a lot of British franchisees into India. What kind of cultural alignment you see between the two countries from franchising standpoint?
So I think this is rather what we have been doing, because a lot of there was a globally a very big American influence on franchising. So most of the brands are North American, and we particularly last 10 years have focused big time on UK, because I felt that the maturity and the capability of understanding customers for a UK franchisor is much better than in the US, because sometimes the formats are much closer to what Indian conditions are. UK real estate is very similar to what Indian real estate is. The formats are a little smaller, is not very large formats operating there. And I think because of the sensibility of the business models, proximity to India, more I think cultural understanding. A lot of businesses are also very similar in nature, and so I felt that they were much more acceptable. On the other side, I've also seen a lot of good franchise organizations in UK which are very they have a phobia not to go outside. They're not so much being exported outside UK. So there's a lot of local franchising, which I think has a huge ability. And maybe Matt can comment on that, which I don't know why, but they've never looked at going so much global, and not much has been done from a franchise export viewpoint from UK, which can become a very interesting opportunity for taking English brands to the world.
Yeah, I think a lot of the UK franchise brands, if they're not a large corporate franchise, they tend to be owned by the owner who came up with the idea, who had the business and then grew the franchise. And not everybody has got the appetite to grow it and take it abroad. And some are obviously concerned about the brand, and will it work in another country? Will they be able to control it, and so on? Whereas you've got large corporate franchises, they tend to want to grow everywhere. So it depends on the type of business, really.
Some of the brands that have done extremely well in exports, Matt?
Well, McDonald's is the obvious one. There'll be a McDonald's on the moon one day, I'm sure. Sorry?
British brands I'm referring to.
British brands. I can't really say off the top of my head. I mean, I don't really know which ones have gone to other countries and really worked. I haven't really got that information to hand.
One of the things that the British government has done very well is to support the small businesses with about 80% of their overheads, which has kind of helped franchising in a big way, because franchising, largely franchisees are small businesses, and one of the their worst hit when it comes to pandemic. So that's very good. But you're mentioning that by October that would not be continued further?
So the furlough scheme is on until October. Okay. And some people have been in a very fortunate position where in the franchise industry, so either franchisor employees or franchisees, they can claim support from the government, particularly for being self-employed. If you started a franchise in the last 12 months, that's probably been very difficult, because there are about 3 million people in the UK that fell through the gaps of government support. So if you were employed, you got 80% of your salary. If you were self-employed, there was a self-employment scheme, but you had to have 3 years worth of, or demonstrate 3 years worth of earnings and everything else for them to base it on. If you were a new start as a franchise, then you may have fallen through the gaps and there was no support available. What we have seen is franchisors really adapting in the UK to help these new start people. So some of them have got rid of any franchise fees in terms of royalties and that kind of thing, or greatly reduced them during this period. I even saw a franchise for offer the other day for no setup fee. I've never seen that in my life. So in 21 years of franchising. So there are different entrepreneurial approaches. but the actual support, anyone that has been supported, that ends in October, and there is a big concern generally amongst the public about people being unemployed.
Sure. One of the questions that I want Gaurav to take up is on the practices. If there is potential conflicts, and I'll come to Matt later, there could be breach of contract, in terms of practices. So you want to take up, Gaurav, in terms of how do you counter that?
So I think, as Matt said, that legal, I think the conflict is part and parcel of any franchise industry, and especially in the adverse times, it becomes even more difficult to handle. I think what he rightly said, the best thing is to communicate with clarity, with honesty and transparency. And I think if you continue to communicate well, a lot of time the logic prevails, and you can save the conflict. But if the conflict happens, then I think it has either arbitration, which is, we also have an English contract law in India, and same runs in UK. So you have arbitration. If defined in the contract, it's an option for both parties to exercise, or otherwise take a legal remedy. I think the best answer was always about doing a logical communication and try to bring in, and a lot of times franchisors also try to facilitate a sale of the franchise if they don't want to continue, or there is a big resale ecosystem now very well developed in UK. So Matt, you can add on that, which is missing in India. I mean, India, Franchiseindia is working on building a lot of ecosystem on franchise resale, but it's quite a mature now in UK to transfer a franchise, and a new buyer can be brought in and so forth.
Yeah, so I mean, 21 years ago when I started in franchising, and the word resale was always seen in a negative light, because people were thinking, oh, the business isn't working, therefore they want to sell it. I think franchise resales now are very positive because, for example, let's just say you've never run a business before, and you buy what I call a man and van type franchise, and you over a period of say 4, 5, 6 years, you really become good at running that business and proficient and everything else. And you might think to yourself, do you know what? I don't want to run around in a van all my life. I'd like to perhaps do something else. So you could sell that business, and you might go on and invest in a different type of franchise. And we see that cycle happening again and again in the UK. And franchise resales now are seen as a positive, like generally speaking. And you have to be transparent as well. You can't just sell a business on claims of what the earnings are in that franchise. It really needs to be audited properly. And there are companies now, franchise resales, for example. There's quite a few companies that deal in resales of franchising now. But with regards to the franchise agreement and legals, I think, to be honest with you, having been a franchisor, well, or let it gather dust. Of the business. I think the minute that you draw out the franchise agreement and start banging the table with it, you've lost it. You know, you've lost the trust, you've lost that relationship, and so on. It is about, yes, you will get problems, but if you communicate properly, 9 times out of 10, you can resolve them. But if they can't be resolved, again, an amicable sale is a very good way of dealing with it, rather than having to go and take the legal route. But sometimes you have to do that. You know, occasionally you'll get people that abuse the system, or abuse your trademark, or your brand and things like that. And you have to act on behalf of the other franchisees that you have too.
Sure. There's a question which has come from one of the attendees, that how do you increase your ROI in a short period? I don't know what she's referring to, but she's referring to the franchisee model globally.
How do you increase your return on investment?
In a short period of time.
You know what? If I knew the answer to that question, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be sitting on a beach somewhere, a multi-millionaire. Depends on the individual. It depends on the business model. I don't think you should be coming into franchising thinking I need to get all my money back within the first 2 months, because I've never seen that happen in any business model. It is you're normally signing for a term on that franchise agreement, be it 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. The term's there for a reason. I think the franchisor, each different franchisor will know approximately how long it takes. One of the things you should do when you do your evaluation, if you're a potential franchisee, is speak to lots of different franchisees and ask them, when did they get their ROI back? When did they get their return on investment? Or when did they start earning enough money that they could start taking money out of the business? And you'll find the franchisor will give you a guide of what that will be it 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, whatever. But you'll find by talking to franchisees, they've all got a slightly different story. And when you talk to enough franchisees, you'll start to hear the same thing over and over again, and you'll start to see what the parameters are on getting your money back and when you can start drawing it out. So some franchisees might have got it back very quickly, but they might have started a business in a very commercially vibrant area. Some might have taken 2 years, and yet it's the same franchise. So you need to kind of weigh up all those parameters, and talking to franchisees is a really good way of finding out the reality.
Gaurav, you want to add something?
Sure. So I think his Matt is right. I think that's what we needs to be done. Is I think the return on investment is not a magic, and they need some time, and franchisees needs to have some patience. And I feel that a lot of times I've realized that the franchisees are too impulsive, and they just look at opportunities or turn around very, very fast, which is not in the right case. Rather, franchising is not a case of high return. This is a case of medium return, medium risk. That's the case of franchising. Franchising is not like your own startup where you can have very high return and high risk. It's a medium return and medium risk. That's the level play of franchising.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Franchising is not a get-rich-quick scheme. And anything that claims to be a get-rich-quick scheme, avoid it like the plague, because very, very, very much, very often they're just not true. More scams.
Sure. A lot of questions coming for, most of the questions are coming for the relationship. So one of the things that people are asking is, what are the potential challenges I can face when I'm early to the franchise? I'm a new franchisee.
So that's a really good question, because you've just invested a lot of money in the franchise, and you need to rely heavily on the franchisor. It's not just going to, and you need to work hard. It's not just going to fall in your lap and everything's wonderful and you're going to earn all this money. So you need to follow the model that the franchisor has given you. Don't think that you can do it better. Don't think you can tear it all up and do your own thing. Because if you start to do that, you'll be a very short-lived franchisee. If you buy a McDonald's franchise, they want you to sell burgers, don't they? And coffee and the occasional salad. What they don't want you selling is newspapers, alcohol, cigarettes, or anything like that. So you have a strict model to follow. And if you follow the model, remember that franchisor has spent a long time putting that model in place and had a successful business. So I think in the early days, it's all about following the model, keeping the communication, keep positive, because if you've never done it before, you're going to go through the franchising blues like everybody does when you panic a little bit because you're not used to it. But keep talking to the franchisor.
Do you also, we usually have these 3 models, which is the FOFO model, FOCO model, and COFO model, which is company owned, franchise operated, franchisee owned, company operated, and franchisee owned, franchise operated. Do you see those models in London, and what is the preferred model there?
Well, most of the models in the UK are what I would call owner operated models. So they're businesses that they invest in the brand of the franchisor. They're in business for themselves, but they're not alone. franchisors helping them. Occasionally you come across, and they tend to be more food chains models where perhaps the brand owns some of the outlets as well. But I would say the majority are the business format franchise.
There's a question from Shriram, and he's saying that they could be in case it's a franchisee owned and company operated franchise, what kind of an opportunity you see there, and what kind of potential challenges there?
Franchisee owned, company operated.
Company operated.
Yeah, so I think franchisee owned, company operated is normally preferred in a large format businesses, which is like where the management is very complex and the company doesn't want to pass that management to a franchisee. More so done in the large hotel businesses where, say, a franchisee would invest in the infrastructure and build the hotel, and the management would go to a hotel management company like a Marriott or any other group. Normally, it is not a preferred thing to do on a smaller format, because the smaller formats, the owner-operator kind of a model bring more efficiency rather than a corporate run businesses don't bring efficiency. But some companies do it. A lot of in FMCG retail, a lot of companies have preferred it because they want to control the supply chain. They want to build their efficiency. So it's a model which is more used on the large format hospitals, hotels, and likes of them, not so much on micro businesses. And if for reasons you want to get into that, I always advise is that understand the microeconomics of that business, understand what revenue shares you're going to get, how you're going to monitor the performance of the business, what is an exit structure, because if a business doesn't perform, you have deployed the asset and the franchisee, the brand is managing that. How do you really cover that situation? That's very valuable.
Specifically for meat category, if you want to elaborate.
Under a meat category is it means that somebody's sale of meat. It's which is more to me fresh food kind of a business model. If that is the case, then I would certainly advise only franchise owned, franchise operated, because you need an operator, you need a last mile efficiency. Otherwise, pilferages, a lot of employee based inefficiency would really come up. And that's more advised to do, franchise owned, franchise operated. But if in certain cases, if you say looking for a property owner who just does the property and then you take over the business and manage that to me is still franchisee owned, company operated, but more looking at somebody who has real estate to bring in. And a lot of these companies like a Domino's in India and other companies do these kind of deals on revenue share with real estate owners, where they bring in some basic part of the capex and bring their real estate, and they get a return on investment on the revenue share from the brand owner.
Yeah, so it's referring to 10 acres and you can have a conversation without discussing F&B in a franchise environment. So one of the big concerns coming with Corona is the restaurant business, and this is going to be my last question as well. So what are you seeing, Matt, in London? What's your advice to F&B operators, especially in franchise?
Well, it's changing really by the day. The last 4 months has been terrible for food and beverage franchises, because basically we've not been able to go to these places. Some of them are opening up now. Some of them are struggling because even though they're opening, the volume of people going in is massively reduced. And so some of the businesses are they diversified during COVID, perhaps by offering deliveries or collections and things like that. But the ones that couldn't do that, they're finding that, number one, even if they open their doors, the trade is 25% of what it used to be. And so they can't keep all the staff. It's a tough time at the moment for that industry.
Gaurav?
Yeah, so it's no brainer that any kind of industry which has a retail front is passing through the same challenges, and challenges are dropped in sales, which is anything 20-25%. Your cost structures still remain a big concern. So it's if you even run it, try to run it also, you will be more in problem than not running it. But this is all temporary. I think a lot of changes would happen. This is not a a permanent situation. A lot of people are talking about and saying that people would not go now or things would change and so on and so forth. I think the only adaptation we will do from this period is things which we always wanted to change. We never got an opportunity to change, like a communication like this. We always wanted to do that. These would become a permanent, but things which we always enjoyed, we always wanted to go to restaurants, especially great pubs in UK. So that's not going anywhere for human nature. This is a centuries of our human nature. We will continue to thrive and celebrate and go out. And so I have no doubt that these businesses would come back. UK food industry has passed through a very big challenging time for last 5-7 years. And they have a constantly, sometimes manpower issues, sometimes, cost issues, sometimes other issues has been a big problem. So I think a lot of people have to put their head together and say how this would save the industry. And it's one of the large employment base for UK particularly. It's one of the largest employers. And you have some lovely restaurants and businesses out there and which are very efficiently run. So I hope that everybody puts their head together and we are able to find some solution post this COVID to more from a different sustainability of this business model, because it's been hit by sometime talent, sometime delivery, now by COVID. So it has been a big challenge for the industry.
Yeah. I mean, one of the questions I would be asking franchisors, if I was a new franchisee looking to start a business in the UK, is, I think a really important question is, what support did you give your franchisees during COVID-19? Because the business model you had pre-COVID might not be the same as it is now post-COVID and the new normal that people talk about. And so one of the things is, one of the questions that franchisors are asking is, do I base my business plan on what it was like before? You can't base it on what it is like at the moment. I haven't got a crystal ball to know what it's going to be like in the future. But I think if you were a new person looking at franchise, I'd be asking the question, what support did you give your franchisees during COVID-19? And I think that would be really telling. That would be a really important question to ask.
So final word, gentlemen, from you, and we'll go first with Matt.
Final words?
Yeah.
Well, I would say that franchising is a great way to run a business. It's a great way to take a foray into self-employment if you've never been self-employed before. If you're very entrepreneurial, it might not work for you because you won't want to follow the model. But if you want to be the kind of person that has a business for themselves, but you want the guidance and the help, franchising is a great way to do that. And like Gaurav said, I think once we get out of this situation, it will bounce back, and it will be, and there will be lots more people looking at franchising because their situation has changed. So I think it's really good, and I think it's going to be something that works well. And like I say, if you're new to franchising and you really want to know just some of the basics of what to do, try out the franchise seminars, because they are very useful and they worked very well when I was doing it with the banks. That was franchise-seminars.info.
Sure, that'll be wonderful. That'll be very helpful. Gaurav, I would like to thank Matt. And
thank you for your taking time out. And I think there is a much bigger synergy and much bigger opportunities we see between the UK and India trade, especially on franchising. And your contribution would be really helpful in terms of even encouraging a lot of UK franchisors to come here. I also know a lot of Indian companies are now looking to enter that market. So we will obviously recommend some of them to you, and where they can seek your support, help in terms of looking at if they want to do franchising in UK, because there is a larger diaspora. A lot of Indian brands, whenever they become big, they look at Dubai and London as two markets where they want to open up their franchise. So we see a lot of bilateral trade between us and UK and especially with Franchiseindia and your firm. And we look forward to working with you very closely.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for inviting me on to the seminar.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. We've enjoyed this great talk with Matt and Gaurav, and hope you've done the same. Stay safe. We'll see you next week on Friday.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.